Hey guys, Poro here with another Worlds 2025 team breakdown, this time for CFO from the LCP. Grand Finals just finished, and CFO won with a dominant 3-0 against Team Secret Wales. With this win, they are now 3 for 3 for domestic championships, and they haven't dropped a single domestic series since early February. This is a stretch of winning rarely seen by any team from any region. For the people who only tune into Worlds and skip out on the rest of the year, what you need to know about CFO is that they are the only team in the entirety of Tier 1 League who have an actively functioning 6-man roster that they opted into as a strategic choice. There are other 6-man rosters across the world of course, such as FlyQuest, BLG, and DRX to name a few, but none of those teams are doing it for a strategic benefit. BLG, for example, have 2 junglers because they aren't sure which one they want to move forward with. When they swap in the middle of a series, it's not for any kind of team draft strategy or some 5-head play. It's because one player was underperforming and the other one has to try and bail the team out. This is how 6-man or 7-man rosters usually work. Both players fight for the spot until one of them proves they are the right fit. Not CFO. CFO's 2 top laners have purposefully curated unique champion pools, and the team swaps these 2 back and forth essentially every single game for more options in Fearless Draft. Both top laners are competent and would easily flourish on another team, and the team has no intention of dropping either top laner. It's a unique roster in that way, and I'll touch on it more later on. For now, let's get into the players. Driver is the first top laner for the team and is mostly the tank specialist. His staples include champions like Sion, Gragas, Ornn, and Shen. When it comes to these champions, Driver is actually quite elite in my opinion. He has a great eye for engages and often has good positioning in teamfights, which gives him a high ceiling as a player. When Driver is on his A game, he's pulling off plays that the best top laners in the world would envy. That said, it's been called into question before whether or not Driver's small champion pool would become a liability for the team. In Split 1 and 2, CFO generally didn't care about this issue, but in Split 3, they've opted to put Driver on more carries. In regular season, he had games on Gwen, Ambessa, and Rumble, 3 champions he ordinarily would never pick. I think the idea to a degree is that Rest, being older, is probably close to retirement, and the team wants Driver to be more flexible if he ever takes on a role as the sole starter. The addition of these carries was pretty hit or miss. The Ambessa and Rumble games honestly left much to be desired, but the Gwen game was fantastic. In fact, it was so good that I became curious as to why it was his one and only Gwen game of the year, and I went to go check what his all-time champion stats were. And lo and behold, this guy straight up has an 80% win rate on Gwen. Of champions with double-digit games played, it's his highest win rate ever. That said, it seems like the carries have dried up a bit, with Driver being back on regular weak side champions now that playoffs are here. I'm assuming this is also what we'll see from him come Worlds. For a more versatile option, Rest is the other top laner. He's been on CFO for a few years now as the only top laner, so his champion pool is much larger. Some would call him the carry specialist, but really he can play just about anything. He usually sticks to bruisers and Cassante, but he also dabbles in ranged top laners and even tanks. That said, his Ornn and Sion are definitely nowhere near the level that Drivers are. Unfortunately, Rest has somewhat fallen off mechanically and is definitely not as good as he used to be. While he's still pretty serviceable for domestic play, he was taken advantage of a little bit at MSI in the individual 1v1 laning matchups. I tend to think that Driver has a higher ceiling, and a part of me wishes the team would devote all of their time into developing him individually. That said, Rest has definitely bailed CFO out in a few series where Driver's champion pool was dwindling, and I expect CFO to keep using both top laners until the end of the year at least. Junja has been in contention for best player in the region ever since he joined it back in 2023. Even with multiple different iterations of teams with constantly changing players, Junja has never failed to win a domestic split, currently being 7 for 7. Part of the reason for his high skill is because he was able to be developed in the LPL and played behind JJ during EDG's most dominant stretches. He even played a key part in their playoffs runs in 2021 and 2022, proving he can play with the best in the world. At any given time in the past 2 years, Junja was arguably a top 10 to 20 jungler in the world, and he's especially great internationally where he's been known as a huge riser in big moments. For both PHG's unexpected MSI runs, as well as the first stand showing, Junja was easily the best player on the team and could gap the best players at the tournament. Not only that, but he did it on multiple styles, being great on tanks at first stand and on bruisers at MSI. With all of this praise out of the way though, I think many fans of the LCP would agree that this has not been Junja's best split, which is funny to think about since he's definitely still the best jungler in the region and a top 2 or 3 player as a whole. But regardless, I think he's been much less consistent this split than from what I've seen from CFO in the past. I think Junja's inconsistencies line up a lot with the team's issues as a whole though, so I'll circle back to it later. To make up for Junja being less dominant, their rookie mid laner HongQ stepped it up even more than prior splits. For a while, I was torn on HongQ. He's obviously having a great rookie year and is the best mid laner of the split, and he had phenomenal showings at both international tournaments that turned heads and made the world take notice of his talent. He'll almost certainly be a great player in the future. That said, domestically, I wasn't sold that HongQ was there just yet. In spring, he would make many critical mistakes in big moments that would lose his team the game, and it was enough of a trend that I was starting to worry that this might be the path he goes down for a while. But in Split 3, he's become much more stable and has really put the team on his back many times. He's not shy about playing unorthodox picks in spots where they're good, and he's solid on all of them. He's also the only mid laner in the region who I trust to pick Azir, which is not an opinion I had after watching his Azir in Split 2. The improvement HonQ has shown is scarily high, and I expect him to look great at Worlds. Doggo is also looking about the same as he normally does. You still cannot under any circumstances give him Kai'Sa, and he's solid on a wide range of playstyles. If you want him to stomp lane, he can do that, but if you want him to sit back and scale to 1v9 late game, he can do that as well. I think Doggo has easily been the best bot laner this split, and I don't really think it's been close. That said, I also think people put Doggo into some conversations he doesn't belong in. After MSI, I saw a lot of people talking about Doggo being a top 5 bot laner in the world, and this is definitely not true in my opinion. I personally think in his current form, he would struggle to find any success in the LPL or LCK. In the LCP though, he has almost no issues gapping everyone, and I'll be excited to see how he does for his 5th international. Kaiwing has been around for an extremely long time and is one of the greatest supports to ever play for the region. He's easily the most experienced player on the team and has attended a shocking amount of international tournaments. During this time, he's made a name for himself as an engaged specialist who has found some of the region's most iconic flanks ever. However, Kaiwing is past his prime, and I personally view him as this team's biggest weakness. For starters, his champion pool is very small. Throughout his 10-year-long career featuring over 800 games, Kaiwing has played just 37 champions. For reference, fellow LCP support Taki has played 46 different champions in just half of the games, and that's pretty standard. In a fearless format, his champion pool is fairly exploitable. Now, domestically, this isn't really a problem. CFO is good enough that most of their series never make it deep anyway, and most of the supports in this region have that engage-only problem. You'll basically never see a team effectively punish Kaiwing's champion pool here. But despite that, even on his engaged champions, I find Kaiwing to be incredibly inconsistent. He can have a good eye for big engages at times, and he does find really good flanks, but he tunnels in on both of these strengths too much. Sometimes he's stepping too far forward for an engage and dies before the fight starts. Sometimes he engages too fast when nobody on his team can follow up. Sometimes he goes for a flank at the cost of his own team's position and finds nothing on said flank. There are also plenty of plays where the fight ends up going well, but the engage would have been bad if the enemy team played better. Apart from the bottom tier supports in this region, I don't think there's anyone else who runs into these problems quite as often as Kaiwing does. On top of that, I haven't been impressed with his mechanics either. To his credit, he did add Nico to his champion pool to split and it's looked good, but the trade-off is that I don't think any of his Leona games have looked even passable. I think most of the games CFO loses against strong teams tend to be lost because Kaiwing is the first one to make a mistake, and I don't expect him to be good at Worlds. Kaiwing's individual weaknesses aside, let's look back at the team. In spring, my big criticism of the squad is that it felt like the entire team would fall apart as soon as something started going wrong in the game. I don't think CFO has had this problem nearly as much this split, so I'm happy about that. However, they've appeared to have replaced it with another big problem, this time related to their objective setups. CFO have fallen into the trap where they fight over every early objective no matter what. It doesn't matter if their comp outscales, or if the enemy team has a better item and level spike, or if CFO have zero control of the space. They've been fighting all of the objectives anyway, and their losses have basically exclusively come from these lost fights. They aren't even necessarily hard fights to avoid either. CFO is opting into all of these on purpose and just getting wiped. This is a problem they didn't have earlier in the year, so I'm not exactly sure what changed or what the deal is, but it's been happening all split, enough for me to notice the pattern. Additionally, they still have many of the same issues I had with them in earlier splits. While Driver has been attempting to expand his champion pool, it wasn't necessarily because the team wanted him to. Instead, it was because teams in this region finally started going out of their way to punish CFO's 2 top laners strategy. Gam had a game against CFO where Driver was in, and Kiaya decided to blind pick Gwen on blue side. Normally this would be a terrible idea, as Gwen loses to a number of fighters and ranged champions. But Driver can't play those, and Gam knew that Driver couldn't play those, and he ended up locking in Gragas to self-counterpick himself on red side. CFO would go on to lose the game, and it was one of their only losses all split. In their next series, PSG tried the same strategy of picking Gwen on blue side, and CFO decided enough was enough, and forced Driver to play Mbessa. Now, luckily for CFO, this was when PSG was in their horrible slump. This was necessary because Driver did not look good on Mbessa in the slightest, and he didn't look great on it when he tried it again in Grand Finals. So there's the first weakness of the 2 top laner strategy. If your top laners have unique champion pools, the enemy team can just draft accordingly based on what champions they know the enemy can't play. We saw teams do this to Rest internationally as well, with multiple teams abusing the fact that Rest's champion pool can't play against Jace. When I said earlier that Rest bailed out CFO in some losing situations, it wasn't because Rest played well or anything, it was because CFO was forced to bench Driver because they literally couldn't use him once his champions were countered. When you combine their top lane issues with their one-dimensional support player, it becomes very easy to beat CFO in draft, especially if you take them to a game 3-5. I think these weaknesses are the reason why CFO's ceiling isn't much higher than where they're at right now, and will be why CFO lose games to better teams when we get deep into World Swiss stage. I think CFO can be pretty solid, and their players are known to rise internationally. I know the crowd has high expectations of them, and I do too. But realistically, I don't see them getting any further than late Swiss, or maybe quarterfinals if they get an amazing draw. I'm ready to be proven wrong though, and I look forward to their games. That's all I have for you for this one. 3 down, 14 to go. I recently started a Patreon for people who want to support me more while I'm making these videos. I have 3 tiers, each with varying amounts of benefits including different types of behind the scene content, and even a custom Poro drawing that I'll display in video outros. If that interests you, check out the Patreon link in the description. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye!